Passed earlier this year, the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act has not set well with Arkansas bankers, investors, and financial leaders. The new law creates a plethora of new benchmarks for financial firms to comply with. It gives federal regulators new tools to guard against circumstances that led to the financial crisis of late 2008. It is supposed to stop the notion that a financial entity could become too big to fail. Now, Dodd-Frank is causing worry among the financial community, not just because of its wide-ranging scope, but the fact that much of its outcomes are still unknown. Over the next several months, as many as 230 rules and regulations will have to be developed, 71 studies completed, and 41 reports turned in from task forces. The bill also creates a powerful and independent Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, whose watchdog powers were described by one business leader as the, quote, next version of the great American legal lottery to catch banks on technicalities. Joining me to discuss Dodd-Frank is attorney Doug Buford, a member of Mitchell Williams Law Firm, which is based in Little Rock and Northwest Arkansas. Doug, thanks for joining me.
Thank you.
Financial regulatory reform is causing a great deal of consternation among the financial community. Tell me, do you think this new law is just getting a bad rap from those who don't like the medicine?
Well, in my opinion, it's another example of Congress not being able to resist the temptation of preparing for the last war. After Sarbanes-Oxley and Enron, we saw the damage that Enron did, and Sarbanes-Oxley came along with a very, very expensive regulatory scheme that probably didn't prevent any fraud. Now we've got a financial crisis, and we've got another attempt by Congress to prevent the things that occurred prior to that crisis from happening again. And I think, all in all, those efforts are probably not altogether fruitful.
One of the positives I've heard from the financial community is that the feds do have more tools and awareness at their disposal of some things that might cause systemic risk to the financial system. Do you think that's one of the more positive outcomes of Dodd-Frank?
I think if there's something in this bill that gives the old and new regulators an opportunity to foresee the next threat, that it will be a huge success. I haven't seen it as yet.
Well, my sense is that the Consumer Regulatory Bureau, of which I indicated much is unknown, is causing the most worry. Is that your take, or do you feel some other aspect of the new law is causing greater stress or worry among bankers that you talk to?
I think, there are two distinct groups that are going to be affected by the bill, those that pose a systemic risk and those that are going to be a victim of regulation. I think that this particular area is more threatening to more people because you don't know exactly what's going to happen, and consumer protection, our history in consumer protection has been uncomfortable.
Well, as I've cited earlier, there's more than 230 regulations to be formulated from this bill, 71 studies, 41 reports. How overwhelming do you think the regulatory process of implementing Dodd-Frank is going to be?
Well, Sarbanes-Oxley, I think, had 2 or 3 rulemakings that were dictated by that bill, and it cost billions in accounting fees, complying with internal control. There's 40-something rulemakings that are dictated by Dodd-Frank. The drop-dead date is July 15th, next summer. The SEC has already created 5 task force of about 5 or 10 people each to deal with their regulatory responsibilities. I think everybody is going to have to spend a lot of time watching the rulemaking, commenting, using their trade association and their industry leaders and their congressional delegation to try to make sure that these rules come out right.
And Doug, how long do you think this hyped-up watch is going to be necessary?
Well, the 15th of July is a deadline, so there'll be a tremendous amount of activity between now and the 15th, but I think it will go on for years.
Well, a common theme I hear from many financial executives is that they're going to have to beef up their compliance departments to meet technical responsibilities of this new law. That, they complain, is going to cause them to focus more on compliance rather than customer service. Or at least that's what they say. So with so many smaller banks in Arkansas, do you think this poses a big risk to their financial stability because of how it's going to add to their expenses?
Yes. I think when you charge people in Washington with the responsibility to avoid the next financial crisis, and they view that as their responsibility, whether or not they impose extra expense on a small bank in Forest City, Arkansas, is never going to hit their radar screen. That was true in Sarbanes-Oxley.
Any sense that you have of this new Congress, since the Republicans took back the House in the November elections, do you think there's any chance that there's an effort made to unwind some of Dodd-Frank?
No. I think that there'll be a parallel attack to try to fight the regulations and make them fair. And at the same time, I think there'll be an effort in Congress to try to curtail or call back some of the more punitive parts of Dodd-Frank. But you have to remember, a lot of this bailout legislation came out of the last administration. This bill came out of this administration, and I think that this temptation to prepare for the last war is bipartisan.
And Doug, if you were king for the day, president for the day, chief regulator for the day, what would be one of the most significant things that you'd roll back or correct? The thing that you think would cause the most damage from Dodd-Frank?
Well, it would take a while to pick it, but one of the things that I think is has the least likely positive result is say on pay and say when on pay. It's an effort to try to put some transparency in executive compensation, but I do not know how a shareholder of Walmart in Little Rock, Arkansas would have any judgment that would be very worthwhile about how much an executive there should or shouldn't make. We just don't have the information to make those decisions.
Well, now, in some respects, it sounds like you're defending some of these multi-million-dollar executive pay compensation packages. And, I mean, for a little guy on the street, a shareholder of Walmart in Little Rock, Arkansas, he may see those tens of millions of dollars in annual pay as being excessive. Isn't that fair?
I agree. And I think the point I'm trying to make is there are some offenders, but we should not excuse our regulators their responsibility to punish the offenders rather than try to have a blanket rule that covers everybody. It's not a one-size-fits-all.